Hello everyone and welcome back to My Opinion. And after losing the first game, India have come back strongly in the next two games to wrap up a 2-1 series win. And on this game, I think there was one change made by each side. Since yesterday's contest was a 20 over game rather than an 8 over game, Bhuvneshwar Kumar came back into the side in place of Rishabh Pant. And for Australia, Josh Inglis came back into the side in place of Sean Abbott. And India won the toss and chose to field first. Cameron Green got Australia off to an explosive start where I think 12 deliveries were scored off the first three balls of the game. Slightly lucky on the first ball of his innings when the ball just evaded Hardik Pandya, who was running back for his position at cover, and kind of other points in his innings as well. But I thought his innings did the job that Australia would have wanted him to do. It gave them the start that they would have liked. And that's two games out of three where he's got telling contributions with the bat to set Australia on their way in the chase in the first game, and in here give them a start which they really should have capitalized on better than they did. But I thought he really has. I think he really has been a find for them in the series. I did not expect him to go this well. Since while I've seen him in the Test match arena, he hasn't really set the world alight with a bat. And yes, he has bowled well in the Test match arena, and I thought in this game he bowled quite well after his 52 in the first inning. So a really good series from Cameron Green in this three-match series, and I think he isn't in the T20 World Cup squad, and look, I don't blame Australia for not including him in the squad because based on what he did before, his lack of T20 exposure, I don't think anyone could have predicted him to do this. And yeah, I don't really think you can include him in the... I mean, they may want to, but it depends on if you could change the squad now, which I don't think you can. So I think that, of course, after what he's done in these three games, they probably would want to include him in the squad, but I don't really think that is a possibility, and I'm sure they'd realise that. So yeah, he went really well, and it was important that he went well because around him there wasn't really much to supplement the way he was going. The wicket of Aaron Finch fell in the fourth over, the third ball of the fourth over. But after 52 off 21, you've got scores of 7 off 6, 9 off 10, and 6 off 11. And so it pretty much dissipated the start that they got. After going at 11 and over for the power play, they then were, I think, 84 for 4 and 9.2 overs when the wicket of Stephen Smith fell. So on a surface which looked like a batting paradise, the start was fairly dissipated, and Australia would have been disappointed by that. And I'm not really surprised that it kind of ended up the way it did. I thought even when in the power play Cameron Green was putting pressure on the Indian bowlers, I still thought, one, there was a bit of luck to the way he was going. He was just kind of swinging at everything. At times it worked, and that's why he got to 52, and the boundaries he did hit were very high-quality boundaries. But there were quite a few times where he swung and missed at the ball. He did have that slice of luck like the first ball of his innings. And I still thought India were in the game as long as kind of, even with the fact that he was playing this way. And I thought that after dismissing him, even if he does score a 50, which he did, and they concede more than 60 runs in the power play, I thought that they'd still be able to do a fairly decent job of pulling things back, and they did exactly that. Now, there is one place in the side that has kind of been under speculation in the last few months, and that's how they'll kind of use Steve Smith. Now, he's batted at number 3 in this series in the absence of Mitchell Marsh, and I'll get to that in a bit. But I voiced my displeasure before, as I think the fact that the rhetoric that Steve Smith isn't suited to T20 cricket, in my view, I just don't understand it. I think, especially if you look at his IPL record at the time, especially in 2017, he was part of the side that almost won the trophy, Rising Point Supergiant, where he scored above 500 runs in that season. And over his T20 career, he's had many good performances, and especially if you give him that run of gains, which a few years back he did have. Now, in T20Is, Australia, until recently, they have kind of used that format, or rather that platform, as a rest phase for their key players such as Steve Smith. And I think a few years back when he was playing a more prominent role in the IPL, there was a thing where at times he really didn't play any T20 cricket between tournaments. So even with that, he was going really well to kind of keep himself in the mojo of the T20 game, you could say. And I think that ever since IPL 2021, where he was benched for a full season, and I've just said the fact that until recently, Australia's attitude towards T20I cricket has been kind of giving their key players a rest, or they saw the opportunity to do so. I think in that case, he didn't have that kind of some playing time supplemented. And therefore, ever since then, he's not really had many opportunities in his favoured role at number 3. And in this side, even the T20 World Cup, he was used as a floater. So I think when you've not been able to kind of get a consistent run of kind of opportunities under your belt at kind of your preferred slot, it is difficult. And I think if you're looking at form players, the way that he bailed Australia out in the ODI series against New Zealand especially, it shows that he is in form. He scored 35 in the first game of this series. Now, do they have to play Steve Smith? I don't think they do. And in my view, I actually think he is in the squad. And I think Josh Inglis, in my view, I would play him at 3, and I'll get to that in a bit. So Steve Smith, Aaron Finch and Glenn Maxwell were dismissed for single-digit scores, and the start was fairly dissipated from what it was with the way Cameron Green was going. And there was a mini partnership between Josh Inglis and Tim David, but when it was getting into the 30s, Josh Inglis was dismissed by Akshar Patel, who's had a brilliant series with the ball. 3 for 33 and 4, but considering the overall score was 186 for 7, so the overall run rate being 9.3 runs per over, I think going under that and Natsu picking up 3 wickets is a great return. So he's had a very good series with the ball, and like I said in my previous video, in my view, I think he offers way more bowling assurance than Jadeja at this point. And I think India will be really disappointed with the last few overs. Bhuvneshwar Kumar, who, despite the fact that he got hit for 12 runs in his first 3 balls, I thought had done really well to only concede 18 in those 2 overs and pick up 1 wicket. In the last 3 deliveries against Cameron Green, the first over, he pulled his length back and resulted in kind of 3 swing and misses, you could say. And in the next over, he only conceded 6, despite being constantly under threat to go for runs in that over. And a delivery which in the last few months has worked with him, which is going wide, but while also dragging his length short. I've spoken about the fact that in the 2021 time, in that IPL, in the second leg of that IPL and near the T20 World Cup, where he was bowling that same delivery much closer to the batsman. So the likes of MS Dhoni and Mohammad Rizwan capitalised on that and hit him for 6s. In the last few months, he's been bowling that same delivery wider. So I think that in this case, it did work very well for him. And the first 2 overs, 1 for 18, considering he went for 12 in his first 3 balls, is a very good result. However, I've said before that, recently, that his death bowling has been a concern. Especially, it was his 4th over, especially in the last few opportunities that he's got. But in this case, he didn't bowl a 4th over because he conceded 21 runs in his 3rd. Again, I don't necessarily think that they need to drop him. I think if there is swing, it's a very good scenario, because even if he bowls 4 up front, you could say he'll be bowling at this point in time to his strength, or for all 4 of his overs. So I think they still don't need to drop him, because luckily they've got options like Jasprit Bumrah, who went for 50 today, but an off game for him. But I don't think he'll do that in the games to come. And Arshdeep Singh, he returns back into the side as well. So they've got those kind of options there. And despite the fact that Harshal Patel went for runs in his first over, I thought he's had a tough time in this series, but I thought that last over, conceding 7 runs and going and taking a wicket, I thought was very good. And maybe that kind of a last over will improve his fortunes in the next few games to come. And when he is on song, I think he has the capability to mix it up, both the quicker deliveries and the slow ones. He hasn't really had a great time this series, but I think this over will kind of prove his some kind of a solace. And despite all that, I think 186 for 7 and 20 overs, despite the fact that India could have finished things off way earlier in terms of the runs conceded. I still thought it was actually a 70-30 split in India's favour going into the break. I thought on a belter of a wicket, with some of the selections for Australia, which I will get to, which I kind of highlighted in my previous video as well, and the batting lineup that India have, I kind of thought this would be a fairly easy win. Daniel Sams opened the bowling and KL Rahul was dismissed, trying to go for a delivery that was there. It was short. He tried to put it to the leg side. The ball went straight up in the air and it was caught behind by Matthew Wade. Now on KL Rahul, I think, look, of course, he has struggled with injury a lot of the time. And when he has come back, I think that there have been glimpses of his quality, some half centuries especially, which you just think, wow. But I think in terms of how often he gets those, I think, well, if he's injured for a lot of the time, he gets back into the side. He shows his quality, of course, and he still should be in the side because on ability, in terms of the opening slot, there is nobody I would say in world cricket that trumps the ability that KL Rahul and Rohit Sharma have at this point in time. But I do think it's a case where he has so much ability. When he plays well, you think, this is how, in my view, he's the most talented player I've ever seen hold a bat. But I just think even he himself would think he'd want to show that more often, because when you're not, when you don't really have a momentum of regular game time, it's kind of quite a crunch situation. But what I mean by that is he's been injured quite a bit, and when he's not injured, you really have that opportunity to contribute for the side. And if you kind of score a 50 every once in 3 innings or so, which the 50 is good, and in T20 cricket, you wouldn't say that's such a bad record, but I think he's capable of kind of going much better than that, and that's why I want to see in the next few games kind of a consecutive at least 30 or 40 kind of a score, because I think he's a much better player. Rohit Sharma as well, two way better players than kind of to get a 51 game and get another 52 games later. So yeah, that's on him. And even though KL Rahul was dismissed, I still thought the scales were kind of tipped towards India in the vast majority. Even after Rohit Sharma's wicket in the 4th over, I still didn't think India would lose the game. I still thought they were well in front, and especially if Suryakumar Yadav played to his potential. Now, I criticised him in the previous video for being a bit too careless at times, but when he's on song, I think he showed yesterday why when he's on song he is in a different league compared to all the other batsmen in white ball cricket right now. It was a partnership that was largely responsible for winning the game for India. I mean, Virat Kohli started off in a decent fashion, going at a strike rate of just above 8 and over. There's some nice shots in there. And I think when Suryakumar Yadav was going kind of the way he was going, I think ever since Virat Kohli got to 30, or 30, I think he was 32 of 21. And since then, he kind of played second fiddle to Suryakumar Yadav, who was really just effortlessly kind of toying with the bowling, or it looked effortless. Especially the shot that he hit for 6 over long off was ridiculous. I think it was off a faster bowler. And I mean, that partnership was pretty much the reason why India were able to get a very good bearing on this chase. And yes, towards the end, I thought even Kohli admitted it. He said he thought he couldn't really get it away, which he couldn't. And after being 46 of 33, I think he scored 17 runs of 46 of 32. I think he scored 17 runs of the next 16 balls with 1-6, and even that 1-6 was off an absolute long hop in the last over. So he did admit it, and he said that it probably shouldn't have gone down to 11 off the last over with the way that they were going. But in the end, it's a job done for India. Hardik Pandya, 25 of 16. A bit of a lucky boundary at the end, but it is what it is. I thought since the third man was inside the circle, a kind of almost a slip position. with the wide Yorker. If you get even a bit of bat on it, it has the potential to run away through that gap, and it did exactly that. So India win the series 2-1, a very good comeback from them. And I think Australia will be brewing. Again, look, it's a bit inconsequential in terms of stakes, but I do think, as I said in my previous video, if it's in terms of title contenders for this T20 World Cup, in my view, it's India, Australia, and South Africa. And Australia are playing against a title contender basically full strength. And so even though they have some players, even though Australia themselves have some players missing, I thought they still would want to put as best of a performance as possible regardless. And even if you look at the two games they lost, just like they won a game that, when they did a 54 of 24, it was a tough ask at that point in time. But just like they won a game which they could have lost in the first game, I thought they could have made more of a game in these last two games. And I don't really understand things from a captaincy point of view when Finch chooses to bowl Sams in the last over again. Looking at the bowling card, I think Cameron Green was available, but again, would I have bowled him at the last over? He may have been a better option than Daniel Sams, in all honesty. I think, yes, 1 for 22 and 3. He started off quite well, and with the new ball, even when he was getting hit around in the IPL, and especially the first half, he still was quite decent with the new balls. And if that is his strength, I thought Finch should have just finished him off way earlier. I don't really understand him bowling the last over. And once again, going around the wicket, kind of bowling quite a short delivery, a long hop really, that a Kohli who was struggling to get the ball away. He got close to hitting a boundary of Hazelwood, but some excellent fielding from Glenn Maxwell kept it to 2. So he was struggling to get the ball away at that point in time for boundaries, and in the end, an absolute long hop, which was a gift really. 11 off 6 and then 5 off 5. From that point onwards, you thought India were going to win the game. So I thought Australia did I thought tactically, I don't know why Daniel Sams bowled that last over in this game or the previous game. Now, on there, I think for India, like I've said in the previous game, what I need to say, and especially also in Virat Kohli, quick word on him, I think, look, 63 of 48, yes, and he scored 40 from 46 of 32. After hitting that 6 off Pat Cummins, he went and scored, I think, 17 of 16 with 1-6 off Sams, which was kind of a bit of a gift. So I think, look, at this point in time, you're not going to be able to expect close to a perfect innings, you could say. I think at this point in time, and I'm sure he realized it, there will be ebbs and flows with this game. If you look at the 60 that he scored against Pakistan, a very respected effort. I think that, especially acknowledging that his game is not at the place where you'd think he'd be most happy with it, and yet he played an innings which helped his team greatly. And in this one, I thought with the way he formed the partnership with Turco Manav, especially in that first 32 ball, I thought he was quite good. And of course, you acknowledge the fact that when the death overs came against Pakistan and the death overs came against here, again, it was a 1-6 against Hasnain and the 1-6 against Daniel Sams. Again, the one against Hasnain was a bit more kind of, yes, it was a slot ball, but you could say the shot was quite nice and all. But I think it's a case where he's got a relatively gifted ball to hit for 6. But apart from that, he has tried his best to get the boundaries. But you can just tell, because of the where his game is at, he hasn't really been able to get in that zone as well and find the boundary, apart from that 1-6 that he's got in both those innings. But I think, look, there's no point me barking about the kind of saying the same statement over and over again, which is his game is not at the right place. Why is he in the side? He's been selected in the squad, and I think in terms of his attitude approaching the situation as to how can I be the most the maximize my impact for the team and be useful for the team, and I think he also realizes that his game is not where he would like it to be. But if you look at the innings against Pakistan, if you look at the innings here, I think it does show an effort that he is kind of thinking along that line of thought, which I think is very good to see. And look, I don't think this is a shortcut. I think that it's illogical to expect such kind of a great outcome, or rather fix to the problems, when, as I said before, how this decent run arose, it arose from kind of an illogical start where you don't take 42 days, a kind of a 42-day break after really going through quite a bad time with the bat, and then suddenly come back and score these 50s. So, I mean, I don't know what would have happened in that break, but I don't think he would have got any coaching during that time. I don't think supposedly being mentally refreshed can translate into getting kind of these good contributions. So there is something that, I still think we have to be mindful of what to expect, how we react to this kind of a contribution. But I do think that acknowledging the strengths and weaknesses at this point in time, and he's also doing that as well, I think there is a possibility that you could really get a decent contribution out of him, going along that line of thought, acknowledging that it isn't going to be rosy all the time, but if he goes with the current attitude that he's got, plus with he's got a 60 against Pakistan, a 63 against 48 here, 100 against Afghanistan. If you kind of combine those two together, I think in terms of India, or him doing his best for India in this tournament, I think right now he's on the path of doing that. I mean, I don't know if I don't want to be too kind of thing to say if he'll carry this on in the T20 World Cup, simply because there's no base for these good performances, and I think that's something that we have to realize in the background, despite these performances that are coming out. So well done for him for playing this innings. I think he also acknowledged that he did slow down at the end, but they got the job done in the end. Now on Australia. Now I said before that in my view Pat Cummins shouldn't be in the side, and in my view the three main seamers should be Riley Meredith, Mitchell Starc and Josh Hazlewood. Now Meredith isn't in the squad, but and then I look at their squad, and of course many people may have known this, but Pat Cummins is the vice captain, which kind of explains why they're not dropping. But it's limiting this side so much, because if he's batting at number 9, he worked out about a number 9 in the previous game, and I mean, I just don't get why. Yes, it's good to have good batting depth, but I think there's a compromise between what he does with the bat and what he does with the ball, and nowadays it's almost like you're getting way more out of him than a batsman, than what you're getting out of him in a bowler, as a bowler in this format. And at number 9, there isn't really a necessity to have someone who does that in the side. In fact, it really only makes things worse, because if everyone in the lineup performs to what they kind of would do, and that's even considering the top 8, and you'd have Mitchell Starc at 8 if you have Riley Meredith in the side, which is still a very good number 8. There's no necessity for the number 9 to be able to bat to such a degree that Pat Cummins is, and you need to add 10 or 15 runs to the score if the other players do, and if the other players don't do their job and you're out early, then you've kind of already lost the game. So I don't get this emphasis on Pat Cummins being in the side, especially with what he does with the ball, but also since he offers batting depth. And I think they've offered him a vice captaincy also because of his leadership role with the test side. And I think it's kind of stopping the side from being a well-rounded side, if I'm being honest. I mean, I don't know what Riley Meredith has done to not get into the side. And okay, Pat Cummins, if he's in the squad, okay. But I'm saying Kane Richardson did not have a great time in Sri Lanka at all. And you at least have another opportunity to select Riley Meredith in the side, even if you're going to play him for someone else. But in the end, they haven't done that as well. So I really don't understand what's going on here. And that's on that. I think on Australia's batting lineup, now, I think you've got a few players, such as the likes of Marcus Stoinis, Mitchell Marsh, Glenn Maxwell for a while, really, until recently. You may be able to put Matthew Way in that category, despite the fact that he has been quite good on this tour of India. These kind of players who, I think, looking at this Australian lineup, you're not afraid because they're in great form. You're afraid because of the ability they possess to change games. Even if 2 players fire, they can dominate any attack. And I think if you look at the likes of Aaron Finch and David Warner, in my view, David Warner, if you take out what he does against Pakistan, his international career, there really hasn't been anything in the last 1 year or so. I mean, he's done really well in the IPL, but if you look at his international career right now, apart from what he does against Pakistan, there really isn't much to talk about. Aaron Finch hasn't been in great form for a while, but you look at those two and think on their day, they can destroy any attack. And I think that's what you are afraid of when you face a side like Australia. I think they've got a core of players that I've said before that have such a high level of skill that when they fire, they can beat anyone. And I think on the number 3 spot, in my view, I think Josh Inglis should bat at 3. The reason why I'm saying this is because I think with him and Glenn Maxwell, with what I've seen of Inglis so far, I think he's much better against spin and will be much better than I think Mitchell Marsh. I think we'll have more answers to the away turner, so the wrist spinner, for example, and the left arm off spinner than Mitchell Marsh would. Marsh doesn't have a great record against that form of bowling when the ball's turning away from him. So I would actually play Inglis ahead of Mitchell Marsh. And you're not really going to necessarily need Mitchell Marsh's bowling as much. I mean, I don't really think it's going to make too much of a difference. You've got some options there. If Stoinis comes back into the side as well, you've got that fourth seamer. So I think that if Josh Inglis plays instead of Mitchell Marsh, I think you've got a very good side. There would be even better if, again, I think they could even put Glenn Maxwell as vice captain. I think he currently is the captain of the Melbourne Stars. He had a good season for them, I think, in the latest Big Bash season. I still don't think he's out of form, despite the fact that he didn't really get runs in this series. I still think he'll have an okay time, I guess. Maybe a few 30s here and there in the T20 World Cup. And if he does even better, that's well and good. So I think at this point in time, he can be the vice captain of the side, with Aaron Finch being captain for however long he is captain. And in that case, with Riley and Meredith in the side, you really have got a side that would be even more of a contender than they are now. And yeah, that's on the series. I think Australia are playing 2 more series in a bit, and India are playing the series against South Africa, the 3-match T20I series and the ODI series. So let's see how that goes. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Please share this video with your friends. And remember, this is my opinion. What's yours?